First, let's start with this case. I am a 34-year-old female, and I am obese. While I'm actively working on losing weight and have made progress, I'm still considered obese as of now. This Christmas, I'm flying across the country to visit my brother and his husband. Because of my size, I booked an extra seat to ensure everyone, including myself, would be more comfortable. While it's not ideal to have to pay for 2 seats, I accepted it as the right thing to do. I know Southwest Airlines has a customer of size policy, but I've had bad experiences with Southwest in the past and didn't want to use them. I also take responsibility for my situation, so I made arrangements to avoid inconveniencing others. Everything went smoothly at first, checking in, getting through security, and boarding. When I settled into my row, a woman with a boy who appeared to be around 1 year old came to my row. She told me to squeeze into one seat so her son could have the other. She didn't ask. She told me. I calmly explained that I had paid for both seats for the extra space. She made a big fuss, which caught the attention of a flight attendant. The woman claimed I was stealing the seat from her son, but I showed my boarding passes to the flight attendant, proving that I had paid for both seats. The flight attendant asked if I could try to squeeze into one seat, but I stood my ground and said no. I paid for the second seat because I needed it, and I wasn't willing to give it up. The flight attendant eventually told the woman to seat her son on her lap, as was originally planned. Throughout the flight, I received dirty looks and passive-aggressive remarks from the woman. I couldn't help but feel a bit guilty, especially since her son seemed difficult to manage and likely needed space. Was I wrong for refusing to give up the extra seat I paid for to accommodate this woman's son, even though it made her situation more difficult? Let's start judging. She's idiot for not buying a seat for her son and assuming someone else would give up a seat they paid for. Odds are she was hoping there'd be extra seats on the flight, so she didn't have to pay and used the lap thing as a loophole. Classic case of you snooze, you lose. Also, sorry, you're not in the wrong for clarity. You're not in the wrong. You paid for that seat. It's yours. An email to SWA asking them to remind their FAs to enforce the seat policy would be warranted too. You asked the FA for help and she told you to squeeze into one seat for the unticketed child. You might even get some miles or goodies for it. You're not in the wrong. You are a little bit of an idiot to yourself for how apologetic you are in this post about your size. You should always do what you can to be as healthy as you can. But being fat isn't a character flaw or a moral failing. We all have our own challenges in life, and you deserve to not be ashamed of your body and yourself, even if you aren't currently meeting your goals. If mom wants an extra seat for her kids, she should have purchased one. She's not entitled to a seat you purchased, and you don't need to feel bad for her bad behavior. Next up, I am a 22-year-old female with multiple diagnoses, including ADHD, autism, dyslexia, dyspraxia, low muscle tone issues, anxiety, and partial blindness. I was diagnosed with these conditions between the ages of 2 and 7. Due to my diagnoses, I'm unable to drive. I can use public transport like buses or take Ubers, but being driven is often the safest and most practical option for me. Multiple doctors have advised my parents that I shouldn't drive because of my partial blindness and anxiety. Since I can't hold a full-time job, I don't have a lot of income, so using Ubers is usually a last resort for me. Yesterday, I asked my dad to pick me up because the bus I was waiting for never arrived. He agreed. But on the way home, he made a few comments about how it would be much easier if I could drive and suggested that I should learn to drive anyway, even though doctors have explicitly advised against it. He said he hated having to pick me up all the time. I responded by saying, "That's just what happens when you have a disabled child. It's something you have to put up with." He took massive offense to my comment and later told my mom, who thought I was being incredibly rude. For context, he picks me up once or twice a week at most. Was I wrong for responding the way I did, or was I simply stating the reality of my situation? Let's start judging. So I'm not judging here because there isn't really anything to judge, but I will posit this question. Do you expect him to drive you everywhere for the rest of your life? Do you have a plan for how you will gain a measure of independence? You're not in the wrong. I have a disabled child who's now 16, and his health issues started at 14. As it stands, he'll never be able to drive, etc. And I've cried for the dreams I had for him and lost. But I accept his new normal. And in that, I'm his personal taxi. Your parents have known what your future would be like for 20 years. Plus, if you drive against medical advice, it would probably make your insurance invalid. Would in UK. That's if you're issued one to start with. And that is a whole legal mess I don't think you or your parents want to get into. You're not in the wrong. Based on your description of your vision in one of the comments, and also your anxiety, it makes sense that you've been advised by doctors not to drive, for your own safety as well as others. Your father's comment seems unreasonable due to your diagnoses. I do wonder, are there perhaps social services available to you to help you get around independently from your parents, such as subsidized taxi services? Next up, I am a 35-year-old male and a very private person. I don't have social media. I don't like my wife, a 32-year-old female, posting photos of me, though I don't explicitly tell her not to. I just don't ask her to post anything about me. When it comes to events like Father's Day or my birthday, I prefer keeping things low-key and avoiding attention. Recently, I was diagnosed with an extremely curable type of skin cancer. It was caught very early, and I never felt scared for my life in any way. I'm an engineer and tend to think analytically, so knowing the survival rate was 99.97% gave me peace of mind. Naturally, I told my wife about it, but she was terrified. I did my best to reassure her, explaining the doctor's optimism and how early we caught it. During these conversations, I told her I didn't think we should tell our daughters, who are 5 and 7 years old. My wife wanted to tell them, but I was adamant. It didn't seem necessary, or something they'd even fully understand. Reluctantly, she agreed not to tell them. About a week later, I got a call from my dad, asking about my cancer. I was confused because I hadn't told him. Turns out, my wife had posted about my diagnosis on Facebook that morning. I was upset and confronted her about it, but she defended herself by saying, "You didn't say I couldn't post it, just that we shouldn't tell the kids." I felt it was obvious that I wouldn't want something so personal shared online. After our conversation, she took the post down, and I tried to let it go. Thankfully, the treatment was successful, and very quickly I was told I was in remission. My doctor even said, "We don't like to say you're cured, but you're cured." Naturally, I told my wife, who was ecstatic. She admitted she'd been worried the whole time and was relieved we could put this behind us. I thought this meant we could both move forward quietly. But last weekend, I came home on Friday to see cars parked on the street and even some in my driveway. I couldn't think of any birthdays or anniversaries I had forgotten, so I went inside and discovered it was a surprise party celebrating my remission. I was mortified. My wife has never done anything like this before, and we've had multiple conversations about how much I dislike surprise parties. I asked her what the party was for and said, "I'm sorry, but I didn't know you planned this. I'm just here to grab some files and head back to work." That wasn't true, but I didn't know how else to react. I grabbed some random files from my office, thanked everyone for coming, and left. I sat in my office messing around on my phone until everyone left the house. My wife saw through my lie, and we fought that night. I told her I didn't understand what had gotten into her. She knows I hate attention and would never want this. I reminded her that this was something deeply personal I didn't even want public, let alone celebrated with a party. We've been cold toward each other all week. My brother, who found out about the party, said I was the idiot for pretending to go to work and leaving the party. Am I wrong for not wanting to celebrate beating my cancer, even if my wife planned the party with good intentions? Let's start judging. You're not in the wrong. Your wife completely disregarded your feelings re personal privacy. She should take down the Facebook post immediately and apologize for ambushing you with the party. You're not in the wrong. Does your wife even know you? I find her behavior to be really odd and inappropriate. You should not have to command or request her not to post about you. It should come naturally to her to A, already know what you'd be okay and not okay with, and B, know to ask if she wants to communicate something about you. It's not giving me great vibes about your wife, to be honest. I cannot tell if she's overdramatic to the point of being a liability and totally irrational, or if she's a bit of an attention hound. Either way, her behavior is not okay, and having a serious talk with her about this is very reasonable. I would guess others find her behavior strange too. There must have been something a bit off for your parents in finding out about your cancer through social media. You need to be able to trust your spouse. In some ways, they should be like an extension of yourself, in that you should be able to trust that they won't do something they know you would not want. Missteps happen, of course, but this is her deciding she wants to handle your medical situation a different way than you want to handle it, which is obviously inappropriate of her. You're not in the wrong. Has she always had main character syndrome? Because it seems like she is trying to get attention by using your cancer diagnosis/remission. Next up, yesterday, my sister hosted a family dinner at her house. It was a casual just because dinner with no special occasion. My sister is an excellent cook and prepared a lot of food for the evening. During the dinner, my 16-year-old daughter finished her second plate and asked if she could have another serving. I told her yes without hesitation, but my sister, her aunt, looked at her with a shocked expression and said, "Another plate?" My daughter turned around looking a bit uncomfortable. For context, my daughter works 2 part-time jobs to save for her college tuition and usually doesn't eat until later in the evening, around 7 to 8 p.m. So I didn't think twice about her getting up for a third plate, especially since there was plenty of food. I turned to my sister and said, "She's been working all day without anything to eat. You made plenty of food, so it won't hurt for her to have another plate." My sister became upset and started yelling, saying that it wasn't my place to decide if my daughter could have more of the food she prepared. In hindsight, I can understand that it's her house and her food, so maybe I should have asked her first. That's why I'm questioning whether I was wrong in this situation. My daughter ended up not getting another plate, and the atmosphere became awkward, so we decided to leave. As we were leaving, my sister stopped me and said, I should have taught my daughter better manners, claiming it's rude to have more than one plate at someone else's house. I told her she was being ridiculous, and the conversation escalated to the point where our voices were loud enough for my mom to overhear. My mom came over and sided with my sister, saying it was rude for my daughter to eat that much food and that I wasn't teaching her proper etiquette. At that point, I was fed up and left the gathering. Later, they started texting me saying it was rude to leave in the middle of the conversation. I didn't want to stay in a place where I felt disrespected. While I do wonder if I was wrong for not asking my sister before letting my daughter get another plate, I genuinely didn't think it would be an issue given the amount of food available. Was I wrong for assuming my daughter could get another serving, or were my sister and mom overreacting? Let's start judging. You're not in the wrong. Families are often the first place where children get judged, and where they don't feel safe. Your daughter was hungry, coming to a family dinner after working hard because she is courageous, and she can't eat when she is hungry. What kind of aunt or grandmother consider that a 16 years old should stop eating? I don't why, but I have the feeling that if your daughter was a boy, she could have eaten as much as she wanted, because a boy needs food to be tall and strong. Second thing that seems curious, your sister makes a lot of food for those non-special occasions. What for if people can't take more than a plate? Just to show that she makes a lot but not giving a lot to people. If she isn't ready to share what she proposes, she'd better not hosting dinners. You're not in the wrong. I frequently host large dinners at our home. If someone grabbed a third plate, I'd fall into an ego coma. I'd be so flattered they liked my food that much. You're not in the wrong. Based on your additional comments with more info, I didn't see anywhere that this is a repeated occurrence that they've had an issue with and brought up to you. It doesn't seem your daughter was being rude. So why did they snap? If they had been planning to use the leftovers for meals later, I could see them at least saying that and having a reason, but they didn't. Does your daughter by chance struggle with her weight? I've had family behave kind of similar because they just didn't like that I was a fat kid. I know for my hubby and I, if we invite you over, you've got free reign in the kitchen. If we had something we were saving, we'd just tell them, the cake in there is for a special occasion, but everything else is up for grabs. You don't have to ask. This is wild. If my niece was at my house and all the food was gone from dinner and she was still hungry, I would be walking her into the pantry to show her all the snacks and leave her there to pick what she wanted and help herself. I get that for some people budget doesn't allow this, but no one goes hungry in this house. Ever. This seems more like a control issue from your sister, and you might want to check if she's annoyed at your daughter for something else, or for that matter jealous in some way, because this seems to be lashing out. Just because someone is grown doesn't make them mature, sadly.